Welcome to this episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest for the second time, where we're looking at their take on the game and leadership aspect of the podcast. Who knows what we might find out, because we all look at this differently, and it's always so interesting to see what the guests have in store for me when I turn up, because we never plan this in advance. So I hope you're as excited as me. Let's get into it, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. And I'm grinning from ear to ear because we're back for our second episode with Siobhan Mears, who is founder, owner and director of the Mears Collective. Welcome back, Siobhan.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be back too.
Excellent. Well, I feel really lucky to have you back, and we also have a third episode in the planning, which is always exciting. So first of all, I'm just going to ask the listeners, have they listened to your first episode? Because that's where you shared your leadership story and how you've got to be where you are today. So if you haven't, please do go and listen to it after this one, because we'll give the full introduction to who Siobhan is and how she gets to be the leader she is today. Exciting times. However, for today, we are focusing on Siobhan's take on game and leadership. Now, we've had all sorts of different views. Every guest, including myself, bring a completely different lens to game and leadership. And I have no idea what Siobhan is going to share with us today. But we've had all sorts of things from the politics, office politics and playing the game in that sense, to games in the literal sense, where one of our guests, Darren, brought a digital game that he'd created for us on the podcast. That was really exciting. And, right through to things like icebreakers, team build games, all sorts of things. So that said, I'm going to be quiet and let Siobhan tell us exactly what her view of game and leadership is.
Thank you so much, Paula. It's great to be here again. I can identify with lots of those topics that your former guests. There's so many elements. It's hard for me to decide for the game of leadership. But what sprung to mind for me is a leader as being somebody who heads up a game. For example, like a manager in a sports game, and being a team player and trying to get the rest of the team in a sports game to follow to have the goal in sight of winning the game, and ensuring that people are on board with the rules, with the methods of the game, to make sure that they all achieve the goal, which is to win. But there's so many different parts to this, and I think a leader really, I identify with a lot of the managerial elements of a leader, and I feel like within a game, there's very much making sure that all of the different players, the team members, are on board with the team spirit, that are working in the right way, that the morale is high for the team to achieve the goal. And there's different conflicts that come up in a game, like in a sports game. There can be different conflicts, but it's about overcoming those and making sure that everyone is focused.
Oh gosh, you've done it again, Siobhan. Something completely unique and different. This is what I mean. This is just saying to the listeners, this is what I mean about everybody has completely different lens on what game and leadership means for them. And mentioning high performing teams, Siobhan, and that whole sort of sports analogy, that's so different to anything we've chatted about before on Game of Leadership. And I would love to hear more about how that shows up for you really in the Mears Collective, I guess, and how you're sort of playing that game with the team that you lead right now.
Definitely. That's something that I can definitely identify with in my business now, both within the Mears Collective, but also with the one-on-one clients that I work with, because I also come in and help them head up their teams as well, from a business management perspective. So team management, team leadership is something that is something that I have a great affinity with. It's something that comes quite naturally to me. I'm quite lucky in that element. I enjoy helping everybody to come together, and that can be challenging for some people in a remote space. So running a business in an online capacity, as I do, with lots of team members that are dotted around the UK and some other parts of the world, bringing them together can be a challenge for some people, and myself at times. When I first started out, it's making sure that you have the right people on board, so the right team players, that they have the same ideas, the same vision or values at the very least. Perhaps not the same ideas, but the same vision and values, because they will be winning. They'll be gunning for the same side. They want the same goal, and the same passion and the same morals as well. I think those are important things. So when we have the right team players on board, i.e. within my business, the members of my team, it's down to me to make sure that they are have a clear understanding of the rules of the game, which might be, I don't like the term the rules, but in a game playing analogy, would be how the business is run, the expectations to the clients. So I've created lots of processes around that. It's something that I do for clients, but I've implemented it in my own business, so that when someone comes on board to the game, they within the Mears Collective, they have a clear understanding of what the rules are, how we work, what our mission is, what the goal is, and what the values are. And with that clear understanding, they're able to help me deliver the end product and the goals of the client. And they also, are respectful, and it's important for me to have clear communication. I think that is imperative when it comes to managing a team and really leading them, is for them to have a clear understanding, as I've outlined, but also to be able to keep in touch with them, having that regular contact points, rather than, assigning a task to somebody and just going into a black hole and hoping that it's done. That doesn't always work. And sometimes people want to have that clear open space of dialogue where they can come back and ask questions in a comfortable space. And I just feel that saves time in the long run, and it means that you get the right person for the right job, carrying out the task to a high standard. And documenting all of the processes just enables us to do that, because they can see a clear how-to guide of how we like to get things done. And it means that I'm able to uphold the standards for the Mears Collective and the reputation that I've got, because you're bringing an element of trust in when you're bringing in other team players into your business, because you're sharing your knowledge and your client base with those team players, and you need to make sure that they are respectful and delivering to the highest standard possible.
Yeah, fantastic. I really love that idea around, I'm not going to put words in your mind, but what popped into my mind there is kind of this sort of team charter that you might have for a game, that you all sign up to, because you want the game to be a success. You want to win at what you're doing. And, with my project management head on, I guess you have a project charter, don't you, often, and that you all sign up to. So in that sense, that's what popped into my head. Is that resonating with you, Siobhan?
Yeah, it really, really is. It's like, that's exactly how, I run it. And I've definitely got that project management mindset as well. I'm more, at the moment, for example, we're working with a client's launch, and I've got multiple team members working on that with me, different experts, and it's about respecting the way in which they work as well, which is important. It's probably like in a sports game. There's, if it's a football game, not that I profess to know loads about football, but
me neither. Don't worry about that.
So just to be clear there.
Should we stick with netball?
Yeah, something like that. But, it's the person who's scoring goals, the striker, they've got a role to play, same as the goalkeeper. Everybody's got a different role to play within the business and within the game of leadership, and it's about respecting how each person works, and bringing in their different zone of genius and working together as a collective. And that's definitely something, hence the name of my business, the Mears Collective. That's what we're all about. It's about combining the different levels of expertise with a collective goal to give my clients the best results possible. And that's something that I can really identify in terms of a game of leadership. Because it's about respecting other people's boundaries, respecting the way in which they work, but all to be aligned with the same mission and the same values.
Yeah, and that collective collaboration, whatever term people want to use, is so important. In my work on purpose with teams, for example, often at the start, when you start working with them, everybody's thinking that the goal of the team might be something quite different. They've never really taken time to come together and talk about what it really means to each of them. So first of all, we look at their individual purposes, and then we take all of that and see how that aligns with what they think is the team purpose, and how they're all going to then work together to achieve the same goal towards the same purpose, have the same mission. And occasionally that means somebody realizes that there's a misalignment, and actually that's okay, because not that they're going to stand up in the team there and then and say this doesn't work for me and off they go. That's not what I'm in for. But what we're saying here is that for some people that can mean that they have that aha moment, that what they're doing is no longer aligned with that particular team, and that's okay. It's then about them having the courage and the bravery to they've got a choice. We talked about this in our first episode together. They've got the choice to decide if they then want to do something about it, either stick with the team where they are, or go out and look for somewhere that's more aligned with their values and their purpose that they've just uncovered for themselves. So it is a really interesting process.
That sounds fascinating. I think that's a great process, really. And I think it just helps for people to understand their own purpose and their own mission, where where are they headed, that they are, we touched on before, they're masters of their own destiny. They can take control of their situation and of their lives, working lives, and outside of that. But also I think it helps from a project management perspective, it helps you drive the project forward, and the right team members and the right team players are on board, and I think that really helps you to define that. So I think it's an excellent process.
Yeah, and it's one that's very, very close to my heart. I mean, it's not that people don't have a purpose before they do that deep purpose work. It's just that they haven't quite connected with it. And once they do, and I know this will resonate with you because of what you've shared in episode 1 about knowing why you show up and do what you do, it becomes that kind of pilot light inside, that guiding light when you're not really sure what's going on around you. You can always come back to your purpose, because you'll know when things don't feel right. The hairs go on the back of the neck and all the other sort of physiological reactions that we have, as well as knowing it in our brain, as much as we try and deny it. We know when things aren't right. Definitely. So yes, a very interesting process.
That's something that I can really identify with as well, and it's something I've been talking about recently, is like leaning into my intuition, and I think that comes with experience in leadership, is thinking that you have to seek outside answers, validation, or perhaps listening to the ego side, maybe listening to just the facts and the figures. Sometimes there's more than that. Sometimes there is something much more than that. It's trusting your intuition, that quite often the answers are within, and we often navigate away from that.
Intuition is such an important part, and I'm glad you raised it, Siobhan, because often people ignore it because they're paying attention to what's expected. rather than listening to their gut, as I often call it, because you get that gut feeling when you know if something's going well and it feels right, versus when it's not going so well and it just feels difficult. You talked about this earlier, with working with a client that might be difficult. It's what's the saying? You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. And it's like, we can sometimes, I touched on before about people pleasing and, wanting to do the best. When you're a high performer and you just want to really make sure that you're getting the best results for everyone, for your team, for your client, you just want to make everything run smoothly. Quite often, and us females, can be known to have done that in the past, is just to ignore red flags, just to, breeze through it and just focus on the end goal and get it done. But I think our internal navigator, our intuition, is there for a reason. And I think it's so important when we tap into that, because if we're guided by that, we can't really go wrong. That gut feeling that you talk about, you just know when something feels right, it just feels easy. But if there's things that are just popping up and you just feel really uncomfortable, that's usually a sign that you're not on the right path.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if only we'd always listened to ourselves when that happened, we might have saved a lot of our challenges along the way. But they're good character building challenges, shall we say?
Yeah, definitely. I've built a character that way, for sure. I think we've learned the hard way. And so definitely in my leadership journey through setting up my own business, when it takes a lot of courage. You learn lots of lessons. I think you learn so much about yourself as a person, so much self-awareness. It's unreal. So I think it's the biggest self-development experience I've ever had, is setting up my own business, to be honest with you. And it's been amazing, but there's been some big challenges. But as you overcome them, you really do step into another level of growth, of personal growth. But doing that, I've learned the hard way. That's why I now know to listen to my intuition. Why not listening to my intuition?
Absolutely. I mean, stepping out of our comfort zone. And I seem to have done that a lot this year. 2022 seems to be the year that I've stepped out my comfort zone a lot and done a lot of growth. You're absolutely right. Opening your own business is one of those moments where you really do push on those boundaries of your existing comfort zone. And we often, as coaches, talk about pushing through that fear zone, because it's scary. We don't want to do it and it feels uncomfortable. But then you start to get comfortable with that uncomfortableness and push into that growth and learning zone. And I often say that's where the magic happens, because you really start to do things that you didn't dare to think were possible, never even realized were around and an option and were possible. So all of that fab stuff starts to happen. And that sort of intuition allows us to push that little bit harder. And back to your fabulous team player analogy of game and leadership, run that little bit faster, jump that little bit higher, run that little bit faster to get that goal a bit quicker, or take that opportunity that you perhaps wouldn't have had the courage to go for. All of those things that come up in your take on game and leadership.
Yeah, definitely. I can identify with that completely, around stepping out of the comfort zone. And I definitely am a firm believer that's where the magic happens, and other opportunities arise from that. You really learn so much about yourself. You learn skills that you didn't know you had. You learn passions that perhaps you didn't know you had, because you didn't explore these avenues. It's just an amazing learning experience, as well as a roller coaster ride. But going with it in flow, and just taking risks, I think is something that I've experienced, has paid off for me.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we all have a different level of risk that we're comfortable with. But again, I guess with our project manager hats on, Siobhan, we can mitigate for those risks to a certain extent. It's all in in the fun of playing that game.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to share with us around that sort of analogy that you've so beautifully shared with us today?
I think it's just important for game. It's all about the team players as well, and about getting people on board. And touching back on what I talked about, great leaders before, it's about embodying that myself, or as the leader, but trying to my best to embody that. Is be somebody that has empathy, be somebody that relates to the team members, be someone that's open to communicate with, and that's what I've seen as great leaders. So I think to really be able to lead the game and to attract the great team players to want to stay with you and work with you in your business and this game of leadership, I think it's important to embody those qualities that you aspire to. Be that person, show up as that person today, and attract the type of people. I think you attract people by what you put out as well. If you if I'm, for example, if I was giving lip service to working flexibly and all of these things, but I wasn't that way with my own team, then it just would unravel. I wouldn't be attracting the high caliber of team members that I've got now. And I think it's important to be very honest with yourself of how you want to show up as a leader, and trying to have those soft skills that you talked about. It's important to learn the skills that it takes to run a business or to show up as a leader in the corporate world, whatever that may look like, but also tap into those people skills, because those are so important. And that we've talked about the Great Resignation, those soft skills, those people skills, that empathy, that respect, and that values, that they will stand us in great stead to be a great leader and a great team player. And people want to be on board with that game. They want to be, they're excited because you're giving off that energy. You've got a passion for the work that you do, and you exude that, and the team feel that, and they want to do well and they want to win with those incentives. But if somebody's more in a dictator type of role, it doesn't work. And I think the game soon unravels.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That dictator approach definitely doesn't work for me, and definitely doesn't for you, as you're sharing. And I know a lot of people that it doesn't work for. It's very outdated, and I will say it's just not inclusive. And if you aren't showing up as a leader, as an inclusive leader, and welcoming all our messy differences as humans, and helping us all succeed in whatever shape or form that looks like for us, then it's going to be hard to succeed moving forwards. That doesn't mean that you're letting everyone, step all over your boundaries of what the business looks like and what the business represents. That's not what I mean at all. But I'm saying, welcome in the differences, be inclusive, give that flexibility. And to your point, Siobhan, you do reap what you sow. You do get back what you put in. Yes, some rough bits come with it too. Of course they do, but that's life. But if you continually give out kindness, support, respect, trust, all of those great skills, empathy we talked about as a leader, then your team are going to want to give all of that back to you. And that's where it really starts to work beautifully.
Absolutely. You're all gunning for the same end goal. And then you can do it harmoniously. And yes, it can be messy at times, but we are, as humans, nobody's perfect. And it's about embracing those differences, learning how to work with people that are different to us or have different expectations or boundaries. As long as we have the same values, vision and goals, and that respect there and empathy, I think any amazing things can happen. But it definitely doesn't mean that you're not as focused on the results for your business. It just means by being inclusive, you're opening yourself up to an amazing pool of talent that maybe they didn't fit in the corporate world, or they weren't pigeonholed here or there, or they had other issues that didn't quite work for them there. But they're amazingly talented, and I'm all about collaborating with people that have got their own zone of genius that may be totally different to mine, but together we work well, and then we can provide great results to the client. And that's what it's all about, the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And having people with those differences, different skills that they're bringing to the table. If I, think back to the team that I had in corporate, and now the new team that I've got, we're all bringing such different coaching expertise. We've got coaching psychologists, we've got those that have a strong background in education, those that have a strong background in corporate like me, those that have a strong background in coaching, like they've been coaching for a very long time in their own business. So we've got all sorts of different, unique, spectacular coaches contributing to a really amazing program. So that is a great way of demonstrating what you've just said about everybody bringing their own zone of genius, and for the strength of the team and the game that we're playing together.
Absolutely.
Oh, Siobhan, what a fantastic view and lens on Game of Leadership. Thank you so much for bringing that to nurture our leadership development today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sneakily thinking ahead because we've got one more episode together next week, which is all about those pivotal moments that make you the leader you are today. So thank you again for just showing up as the brilliant leader you are. It's an absolute pleasure, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I always think the game episode is one of my favourites because we get a real insight to our guests' take on their ideas of how games and leadership fit together. Every one of them is different, and just when I think there isn't another take that we haven't thought of or covered, one of our guests comes up with something totally different and unique. It's really exciting. Look, now it's your turn. See what you think, see what resonated with you most, and as always, I encourage you to reflect on what you've heard and see what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and this is Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I really look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye for now.